Hi, Elizabeth. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth is the D2C and data manager at Lionsgate. And in addition to its well-known theatrical releases, Lionsgate also owns the Stars Premium channel. And whatever Elizabeth and the marketing team at Lionsgate is doing online appears to be effective. According to a new report from Markery, Lionsgate is a close second to Disney in getting its share of overall revenue from direct-to-consumer online. Of course, it ran into a real problem in early March. It had a theatrical release schedule, of course, and suddenly that entire channel closed down. So, Elizabeth, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about where you guys found yourselves in early March. You had a release schedule, and in fact, you had a title that was ready for release at the time. So tell us where you were there.
Yeah, of course. So we actually had I Still Believe planned to release theatrically, but with COVID and everything going on, we had to pivot really quickly as theaters were going to close down. And this is something that we have never experienced or expected to happen. And we had no timeline of like when people will be back in theaters, or even if like theaters open back up, will people be comfortable going back? So we pivoted, I Still Believe, to do like a PVOD release. And we also have Antebellum that is now releasing in PVOD.
Maybe you should tell us a little bit about what I Still Believe is about, what audience it's aimed at.
Yeah, of course. I Still Believe is a Christian faith-based film, which I think really turned out well too, as for like the timing and just with like COVID, and it fit really well. Um, I'm not sure if any of you are aware of I Can Only Imagine, but it's kind of like a sequel to that, which is also like a faith-based Christian film as well.
Typically, when you use you're using digital channels to drive theatrical traffic mainly, especially, well, for films like these. So let's tell us a little bit about what your typical pre-COVID use of digital media would be to drive actual foot traffic. Which channels are you generally using? What kind of campaign timing do you have? What's the typical movie-going target for something like that?
We usually have a theatrical release, and then it comes to home entertainment, which is like an EST and DVD release. Our strategy is very different, and we use a lot of different platforms, starting from like social, programmatic, like connected TV, OTT. And I think the difficulty for us here was trying to get in front of audiences, like where the audiences are. We didn't know like where they would be. Now that the theaters are closing, will they be watching on PVOD or online, or will they just like not be interested in watching films online at all? So I think that was like the biggest challenge for us.
So what was the change in release strategy? You had to make a quick decision as to what you were going to do with this film, and how did it and what sort of marketing challenge did it pose for you?
Yeah. So since there couldn't be a theatrical release anymore with all the theaters closing, there was a decision that needed to be made, and we had released it in PVOD, which is a premium VOD. That is how I Still Believe was released. So it was on like a lot of like the online like retailers. And the biggest challenge was like not knowing who would convert. There's always like a theater, we have a demographic for a theater goer, and also like a little different demographic for a home entertainment consumer.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the demographic, the interest and the behavior of like the two audiences are different. So we weren't sure, do we need to go after a mixture of people, or just like broader audiences, or just like the home audiences? And I think that was like the biggest challenge for us, of like not having any campaigns that we ran for PVOD and just not knowing who would convert.
What are some of the key differences between the streaming and the home video audience versus the movie-going audience?
I think for the home and audiences, we usually go after males, like 25 to 54 males, and theaters are a little bit different than like the home audiences. And for the PVOD audience, at least for I Still Believe and The Secret, which are the two films that we released in PVOD, we did see females convert as well, which was a little surprising for us, since that's not usual for us, and it's not like a typical demographic that we go after.
So your key challenge is that you have to define an audience that's never been defined. You don't even know if this audience exists for
Yeah.
premium VOD and for a first run release of this kind. So tell us, first of all, how did you go about doing this then? You know, how do you start building an audience that you don't even know exists?
I think it comes with a lot of testing and learning. Honestly, we're still testing and we're still trying to figure out like who the PVOD audience is. We're still in like a very evolving landscape. I know when first COVID happened in March, people were all at home, and I know now they're trying to like get out and do something that's more active and outdoors. So I don't think honestly that we have a perfect PVOD audience yet, but in order to find who the PVOD audience is, we did have like a pre-street campaign. So we did a campaign just to see who would convert, which is something that we don't have. We usually have like the leisure of having the theatrical campaign to see like what the demo and like the interests of these people are. But since we didn't have that, we did a pre-street home entertainment campaign just to
And
test.
what does that look like? How do you execute that?
We did a trailer push, and our website had like we had some pre-street where it's available pre-street orders, just so that people are aware. It was more like an awareness campaign for us, just to figure out like who the audience is, to make sure people are aware that this film is coming. I don't think when we say PVOD, I don't think people are like, oh, like I know what that is. So it was just trying to get them more familiar with like where they're now able to watch movies, and now they could stream it a different way and not like theatrically.
But in addition to that, you had some first party data?
We did have first party data. We did a lot of like lookalikes that off of like the first party audience, and also did like poll. We tested poll intenders. So before we—
I'm sorry, what are poll intenders? Would you explain that?
So we did like a poll study just to gather like that audience, and for our pre-street campaign, we would use pixels to collect whoever landed on our website so that we could create lookalikes off of that party as well.
And your first party data was coming from stars?
We have a variety of first party data that we work with. Sorry, there was like a bug. We work with different vendors and platforms as well. So we have our like first party data, and then also use whatever first party data we have within like our platforms, whether it's like social or like a programmatic.
Were people who were already paying, say, for premium cable or premium channels, did they end up being more likely to go for a first run, paying for a first run single viewing?
For this with just this campaign, I think it's hard to say that like it's this set of audience, as like the environment is constantly changing, as I have said. But we are definitely seeing, at least like for myself and what I'm seeing from like people around me, consumption habits are shifting, and I think people are finding new ways to consume content nowadays. And people are shifting more to like connected TV and OTT play. I know a lot of people around me, my parents even, they're becoming more familiar with these like online platforms and where new content are being released. I think there is still an interest, and people want new content to be shown. And since these are the platforms that people are now watching, people are becoming more familiar with them.
How did you guys come up with a price point for this? Since this is a new experience for most people, and the idea of seeing a first run movie, there's had to be a lot of question about how do you price this? And then what went into the decision about pricing?
I can't say like too much about the pricing, because I'm more towards like the marketing and just like managing like the data side. But I know there was like a lot of thought that went into the pricing, and just like seeing what other.
Well, what was the price? What was the price point for this, by the way?
It was $19.99.
$19.95. Okay. And for a one-time viewing.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at what we're talking about at the movie that we're talking about. Ryan, if you could play the clip for us now, at least get a sense of the ad for it.
What the world needs now is family.
I'm proud of you.
love,
every moment I'm with you,
and hope. Don't miss the incredible true story, I Still Believe. Enjoyed at home, now on demand.
So tell us a little bit about the media plan that you did end up with for this, the sorts of channels that you ended up using, and how that was different from the way you would have done this as a theatrical promotion.
Yeah, for the channels, I don't think it was as different. It was more towards like the targeting. We did have like, we did consider OTT and connected TV and try to see like other awareness strategy, but I think for targeting, we try to add in, at least for I Still Believe, like theatrical audiences, because we didn't know like if the theatrical converters, people who are interested in like theaters will be watching this. So I think that more than like platform wise, targeting wise, we try to add in like whatever we can to test.
Mm-hmm. But so you were right, you were relying mainly on pre-roll. Were we seeing this mainly in YouTube and Facebook and Instagram? Where were we seeing this? And where were we seeing the most impact?
The spot that you just played, it was shown on social. We had like Facebook and Instagram as well, and you would see it on YouTube. We did a YouTube push as well.
What was the, and by the way, the windowing now is quite different, because when you're doing a theatrical release, you're really going for that first weekend, right? So the week leading up to it especially is really important. When you're talking about a premium VOD release, how did you think about, what did you think about in terms of timing, of how long you would run this, when it would peak? What kind of frequency you were aiming at? I mean, did you have a sense of how many, do you get a sense after this of how many touch points it took to move people towards
it? We had the like a trailer push awareness campaign, which was only for a couple of days. And then we did post rate, but I think for I Still Believe it was because we had like a really quick turnaround and trying to get this awareness campaign up very quickly. For The Secret, which is the next title that we released on PVOD, was had a little bit longer of a street window, since we had more of a lead up time and we had more time to plan for this campaign.
What kind of behaviors did you see? Were people really, was there sort of a burst of activity at the exact release time? Were people sort of treating it like a streaming version of a theatrical release in that sense, or were you seeing a much easier going or longer lasting pickup?
For both campaigns, we did see a success in more people converting and just going to wherever this movie was streaming and where they could purchase. I think performance was phenomenal considering the environment we're at and comparing to other home entertainment release that we had previously.
Well, how would you characterize phenomenal?
I guess a lot of people, we look at just like, we use our Lionsgate.com website and we mostly drive all of our media to Lionsgate.com, and we've just seen a lot of people go to the page and then move further down the funnel of just like clicking the buy now buttons and then just clicking the specific retailers.
How did you handle optimization? Since, as you know, I mean, obviously you said you were doing some testing up front, you were trying to loosely identify an audience, but it was only really as you execute that you're going to get a sense of whether you're hitting your target and getting what you need. So in this case, how did you handle optimization on the fly? How many course corrections did you make, and what were the big important ones?
For optimizations, the media team did more frequent optimizations. We got reporting more frequently because we just didn't know how everything was performing in this like PVOD campaign that we've never done before. So optimization definitely was more frequent, and if there were any like algorithms within like the platform that we can utilize so that it auto-optimized to like the best performing targeting, we definitely did apply that as well.
Were you relying on the platforms like Facebook to sort of tell you, or were you using your own?
We did rely on platforms where we can, but we also like manually did look at like different targeting, different demographic, and different placements to see if there was something that wasn't performing well, that for like buy now clicks, or if there was like a secondary KPI that we were looking at, we did optimize that as well.
What were the things that popped for you in terms of what surprised you, or what were the major course corrections you did make as you were sort of aiming at this new audience, aiming at this new behavior, maybe leaning on or expecting different things from different channels? What popped for you that was new and unexpected?
I think something that was the most unexpected was having a larger female audience convert in this home entertainment landscape, since we go after mostly like older males for a lot of home entertainment, and we see like success in older males within the home entertainment landscape. But just seeing that there were a lot of like females converting and showing interest was surprising. So it seems like PVOD is somewhat of a different audience. We won't know until we do more campaigns and more for different titles, but at least for these two, it was more of like a female interest film. So that might be another reason why we're seeing more females convert. But for our other like more titles that females were showing interest, we did have like more males convert for some of our titles. So I think that was definitely just like the biggest learning and the biggest surprise for us.
Any surprises or that came out from the media channels you used? Did different channels perform better or worse than they would have ordinarily?
For now, I don't think there was one specific channel where we were like, oh, this was like very different. A lot of channels, we like tested a lot of channels and just optimized out of like what worked and what didn't work. So I think maybe after a couple more title tests, I could go back with like more learnings of the channels, but I don't think we could say at this point.
Well, you did have a second shot at this with a longer time frame when you brought out The Secret over the summer. And that released what, early July?
Yeah, I need to look back, but The Secret is very recent.
So what did you implement in this campaign for The Secret that you learned from the previous campaign?
I don't think we can say from like, I still believe that we understood who the PVOD audience is with just like one campaign, and we're still honestly just trying to understand the consumer. We're still testing and learning, and we're trying to add in like other targetings to see like what perform as well.
Well, tell us a little bit about the testing process. I mean, you're doing this in much faster turnaround, with less knowledge than you ordinarily would have. So what have you learned about the process of testing itself in terms of internally, how you organize it and communicate internally about it, and how you do it faster?
I guess from my end, where I look at like more data and data tools, I try to look at more insights. And when the campaign first launches, I go into Google Analytics just to look at like the demo and interest, see if we have anything that we're like leaving out, see platforms to see if people are converting, if all of our pixels are set up correctly, since it's just like a completely different campaign. So I think I'm in Google Analytics a lot more than our other just home entertainment campaigns.
Well, you're also working in a more performance-oriented mode than you may have before, and that you really, I mean, one of the things I think you found is that you really have to drive people towards buying something, and that changed the way you develop the site, right?
Yeah, for our landing page, we still direct it to Lionsgate.com, but we had shifted and tailored to meet like the PVOD needs, like letting people know like where it's available, making sure that for even VOD, if we have pre-order up on retailers, just adding that to the website itself. I think for us, it was just making people aware where they could watch these films, since PVOD it's not something that's common. It's not something that people have seen in the past.
I want to remind everybody that we're taking questions. So if you have any questions, signal Lisa with the hand raising button, and we'll bring you in to ask Elizabeth. Let me ask, since you mentioned about the problem of PVOD, and I think this actually was a common problem that I found among a number of marketers talking to them throughout this crisis, is that you're getting, many of them were getting new consumers into categories that had never done it online before, never bought eyeglasses, never got a prescription. So there was sort of a new education that needed to take place. And it seems like this is true for your category as well. People didn't understand necessarily what it meant to buy a first release streaming film. What kind of challenge was that, and what did you learn about having to educate your consumer as to what model you're even talking about?
Yeah, I guess we're right now finding out who the VOD audience really is, but we just know that we can't, now we know we can't limit ourselves to like the home end consumers only, or just like the theatrical consumers only. It's like a newly defined audience for us, and we probably need to do a lot more testing to see and just like tailor our needs to them. Sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Well, what sort of education do you need to do with this audience? Have you found that you've needed to change some of your creative, change some of your landing pages so that you can even explain to people basic questions about PVOD? Well, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Why is it priced this way? What does this mean? Does it mean I get to go back and see it again? Have I bought this? Am I really, is it just a one-shot deal like going to a theater? How do you explain that to people?
Yeah, for our call to action, we say like from theaters directly into your home, or we don't say like it's a PVOD, since I don't think people, when we say PVOD, I think it's more of like a technical term, and they don't know what like PVOD might mean. So we usually, for just like our call to action, we just say enjoy whatever title now on demand, so that they're more, I think what just making the call to action that way, people are more familiar with it. People who are like VOD consumers usually understand what it is. And when we say that it's like from theaters directly into the home, I think with COVID and the situation we're at, people are understanding more where they could watch it. And when they go to like our website, we try to put in as much information that we can, just so that they're aware where to purchase.
Lisa, let me ask you to come in and see if we have any questions from the audience.
Yes, we do. From Maggie Leathersitch. She has a question. Maggie, you there?
It's a tough one, my last name. Sorry, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Did I pronounce it right?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you, Lisa. Elizabeth, thank you for speaking today. I had a possibly silly question, but I wanted to ask it anyway. How are you validating your conversion audience based on demographic data? Is it based on your attribution platform? Is it based on DCM data? How are you validating that it's a certain demographic?
I think we are on a lot of like data and marketing analytics platforms. So I think before our pre-campaign, we do a lot of research to find out who is talking about this film, who are our audiences. So I don't think this PVOD campaign was any different in trying to find out who our audience is. As for our converting audience, once our campaign starts, I think we just try our best to optimize, look at like Google Analytics, use any of like the tools that we have on our end, look into programmatic reportings and just like a lot of reportings to constantly optimize to find who is converting.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. We also have our Ashley. She has a question for you as well.
Sure, hi. So I know you had talked a lot about first-party data. I'm curious, this is going to be a very loaded question. I'm curious on what is this first-party data? Is it emails? Is it page engagers? Is it pixels? And if so, do you have a strategy of like a DMP where maybe you had another movie that was very, very similar to the audience that you want to go after this current movie? Is there any kind of DMP strategy or sharing of audiences between titles?
Yeah, we do collect data. We actually do all of the above. We use email addresses where we can. We do pixel data and we do page landers as well. I think it depends on like what platform and whatever data we have available as first party. So yeah, we do all of the above. Wherever we can get our hands on first party audience, we try to collect and just utilize. And if there is a campaign, like if there were like romance campaigns, I still believe had a big romance aspect, then we would try to combine like those page landers or any, like if we had pixels on romance titles or Christian faith-based titles, we would use those audience and create lookalikes off of those as well.
And then are you using a DMP for that?
Yes, we are. We have been testing a couple currently, and it's been on and off on like what specific one we will like be moving forward with.
Okay.
Let me wrap, Elizabeth, with a crystal ball question. Given the limit, I know it's a limited sample set of only a couple of releases, but from what you've seen so far, can we expect more PVOD first releases on online going forward, even after we go back to theaters?
We do have Antebellum coming up. So with the environment we are at, we are pushing titles to PVOD, but after theaters open, I'm not entirely sure what our strategy will be. I think we will be reevaluating when that happens, as everything is changing. We just don't know what to expect nowadays.
Well, Elizabeth Kim of Lionsgate, thank you so much for your insights this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. Take care.